Assalamu alaikum Nazreen. I'm here with Kaam Ki Baat. Today I'm going to talk about some very important issues, and it's going to be a bit detailed video, but it's because the year is ending and I would like to summarize this year's, whatever happened in this year's, the events of this year and probability of upcoming events for the next year. Yes, if we talk about the events, I will briefly touch on other events, other events, but I would like to touch on the strategical events, especially what has been happened in this region in terms of political and demographic matters. And on the other hand, we will talk what may happen after some changing of regime around the world. But first of all, we'll talk about the most concerned thing for around the world, and that was COVID-19 coronavirus. Yes, in 2019 we heard the news of coronavirus from Chinese city Wuhan, and that was really very much concerning. And due to that concern, everybody in the world was a little bit scared, but they didn't know what's going to happen. Then all of a sudden it came out in February, and January, February in the world. And then it started spreading so quickly that within 3 to 4 weeks, the whole world has to shut down. And that shutdown was absolute shutdown of the normal life. We have seen all the big cities were closed down under a lockdown. And there was very much scared, I should say, fear around the globe and all over the world. It was like since 1919, this was the first pandemic which has brought the world to that serious level, that everything was closed, everything was shut down, and people were very concerned that what is going to happen. Because of that, it was like, I should say, even if you see Paris, Paris, London, Indonesia, Jakarta, and then Frankfurt, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Las Vegas, then in Delhi, Karachi, Lahore, Dhaka, everywhere in the world, it was complete shutdown. World tried, that was the first layer of this pandemic, COVID-19. Since then, it is been spreading, it's been controlled in some countries like New Zealand and Australia, it has been controlled. Some Vietnam and other countries, they were hardly affected, but most of the world was very affected by this. And now the situation is that second layer is on a peak at the moment, especially in Europe and particularly in Britain. Over 35,000 people a day are getting affected by this new virus, and there is a new strain of this virus which is very much concerning, which is believed to come from South Africa somewhere. But the thing is, at the moment, the world is very much concerned that what is going to happen and what is going to be the coming future of this virus. Everybody is doing whatever precautionary measure they can take. And this is very, I should say, very big concern for all of us. Now in Pakistan, the situation is also getting very serious as far as pandemic is concerned. And due to this pandemic, I would say that in Pakistan, people are very much concerned, but still they are not following the SOPs. People are, like in education, people where there is a higher rate of education, they are a bit more careful, but in villages, people are not bothering. Same in Europe, same in America. So many people have come to the point where they disbelieve of COVID-19 and they call it just a conspiracy to put the vaccine to everybody in the world. And there are many conspiracies in relation to vaccine, that what is vaccine going to do and what is going to happen. So as far as COVID-19 is concerned, it's a very big challenge for the world. Let's see what happens in coming days and coming months. Vaccine is available. World Health Organization and other world countries are planning to put the vaccine to everybody in the world. It is a long time taking process. It is going to be resisted as well. Like in America, black people are not agreed to get the vaccine. And in so many countries, most of the people where they have conservative ideology. They don't want to have this vaccine done, so it is going to be a challenging for the government to make the people believe to go for the vaccines. This is the situation of corona, and we are still hoping that the world will be able to come out of it very soon, and we are praying for it. Now let's talk about the situation in 1 minute. Sorry, I had to get up. Okay, now let's talk about the situation around the world in terms of other events which happened in this year. One big event was in the beginning of this year. There was a big jungle fire in Australia, which is believed to be the longest and most, dangerous fire, which has damaged the largest area of hectares and hectares of jungles in Australia, and it carried on for months. Eventually that was controlled, but it has killed millions of animals and millions of trees and few human lives as well. And due to this pandemic, and this thing was in the same era, so it was not that much highlighted, but as a matter of fact, that Australian jungle fire is one of the biggest tragic news of this year. Although we believe that 2020 was not a very good year for anyone, most of the people in the world, in terms of news, in terms of whatever happened, the events happened in this world. Especially when we talk about events happening in the world, that the whole world was going towards different kind of conflicts, different kinds of movements, agitations, revolutions. All this we saw in this year, and big changes. If we talk about globally, yes, Brexit is completed this year. What was Brexit? What is Brexit? Brexit started in 2014 election, when Prime Minister David Cameron, during his election campaign, promised to the people that he will go for a referendum to ask the people whether they want to stay with the European Union or they want to be separate and be independent again, as Britain was independent prior to the European Union in the 70s. The results, and Prime Minister David Cameron fulfilled his promise in 2016 and went for a referendum. But according to all the surveys and all the polls, it was very much expected that people will prefer to remain in Europe, because there are much more benefits to remain in Europe than leaving or Brexit with Europe. But because of the, Orthodox Britons, people who are very much, conservative in terms of their country identification, in terms of their own identification, they had made it a very strong campaign against against living in the Europe. So they were favoring that people should decide that this is a time to come out of Europe, and England has to be an independent country and have no ties of European Union style ties with Europe. Eventually, surprisingly, by only 1.5% of margin, the people who were in favor of Brexit, they won the referendum. And after that, it was a big, long, ongoing, breathtaking and nerve-wracking process of Brexit. And during this process, 3 prime ministers has to step down from Britain. First, David Cameron stepped down because he said that he believed that he was the part of the ideology of remain in Europe. Because his ideology is not being accepted by the people, so he doesn't feel ethically he should be a Prime Minister of Britain anymore. So he stepped down. Then Theresa May came in power. Theresa May did try to get the public opinion, and they tried to have a deal with Europe. She was failed. She went for general elections. She won the elections. Then again she tried, but she couldn't get that much majority. and she couldn't complete the dialogues with European Union, so she failed as well, and eventually the Brexit deal took another prime minister. She has to resign, with her tears in her eyes. Then Boris Johnson came. Boris Johnson went for general elections, and again he came back with much more power, much more public support, and eventually, after a very nerve-wracking procedure and dialogues and deals with agreements with the European Union, especially in terms of matters of traveling, matters of immigration, matters of business, matters of healthcare, matters of services, and matters of economy, matters of people settling in each other regions. Eventually, they have come to an agreement which is a deal Brexit. There was very much fear that there will be a Brexit with no deal, but eventually they have end up with a deal Brexit, which is a bit relief for the people in Britain. And that relief is including their visa-free traveling for the 6 months. Every 6 months, they can stay 90 days without any visa. Then as far as business export-import is concerned, most of the things will remain unchanged as far as duty or taxes are concerned. So the fear of hike in prices in Europe, in England, is a little bit less now. Then it comes to the other matters, but luckily, as per the news so far has come out that this Brexit deal is a document of over 1,200 pages, and some of the highlights of this document tells us that most of the matters being settled. Yes, there are 2 matters which were not compromised by Britain, or one is abiding by the European laws. It is very much clear now that Britain is independent, and Britain courts are independent to give the decisions on their own and make decisions on their own, and they are not bound to follow European laws anymore. So it is a bit bad news for the people who stay remaining or asylum in Britain under the human rights of European Commission or European courts, because when it comes to human rights, the European courts are much more lenient and much more, I should say, soft towards giving the human rights stay to the people who are illegally immigrant here. But anyway, Britain has already announced that they will come up with some kind of, I should say, amnesty scheme for the people who are in Britain staying illegally or waiting for their status to be clear, which means that eventually they will have some kind of relief. Then in terms of other Brexit deals, it's not been very much clear, but so far so good, so hope for the best. Now, let's talk about the region, the subcontinent. As we all know that, unfortunately, this year, fascist Prime Minister of India, Modi, is still in power. And because his victory in his recent elections in 2019, he carried out the siege of Kashmir. He carried out doing atrocities in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. And people in Kashmir are in illegal Indian occupied Kashmir. People are very much concerned, and people want freedom for themselves, and they are fighting for the freedom. But from Indian troops, over 700,000 troops in Indian Kashmir are doing a kind of genocide of Kashmiris, doing the war crimes in Kashmir, and people are really, really resisting, and I believe that this is the time when Kashmiri people will get their freedom without any doubt. This is the fight of right. This is the fight for their right of self-determination. This is the fight for them to get their freedom. And this is very much hopeful that they will get their freedom this time. And their struggle of 70 years will end up as a successful freedom for the country and for their homeland. Because Pakistan as far as Pakistan government is concerned, Pakistan army is concerned, Pakistan public is concerned, they are all with Kashmiris, they are all with their struggle, and Pakistan believe that Kashmiri people should have the right of self-determination, and they should be able to have practice this right under a plebiscite according to the UN resolutions promised by Indian Prime Minister at that time, Jawaharlal Nehru. And Pakistan is eager to enforce the United Nations, to enforce Modi to implement those United Nations resolutions for the independence of Kashmir, or for the right of self-determination for the Kashmiris. Because I believe that one day Kashmiris will get their freedom. Kashmiris are fighting for their freedom. Kashmiri youth is giving their lives. Kashmiri mothers are giving their sons. Kashmiri wives are giving their husbands. And Kashmiri are not going to compromise on their fight for their freedom. And no matter whatever atrocities Indian troops are doing in Kashmir, whether raping the women of 70-year-old, 80-year-old, or a child, or a minor girls, it's not going to stop the Kashmiris for their right of self-determination. Whether they are burning down their houses, whether they are killing youth, whether they are harassing them, whether they are putting them in the jail, whether they have putting them under the curfew, whether they are demolishing their identity, demolishing their crops, demolishing their economy, still Kashmiris are going to fight, and they are fighting for it. Pakistan is always supporting cause of Kashmir. Pakistan is always believed that Kashmir will become a Pakistan, because this is the will of the people of Kashmir to be the part of Pakistan. And eventually Pakistan believe this is what should happen, because this is what is their desire. Fascist Modi has not stopped his cunning steps and his atrocities only in Kashmir, but he is doing so many illegal steps against the minorities in all over India, through RAC bill, through Citizen Amendment Act, which has been targeted, which is targeting only Muslims in India. And all the human rights organizations in the world have clearly shown their concerns that why India is doing that. It is absolutely inhumane and illegal act to making the laws considering to demolish or to affect a typical of certain minority. But Fascist Modi and his allies and his friends like Amit Shah and Jogi and Ajit Doval, they are not understanding that they are actually doing everything to harm India itself. It is going to affect India, it is going to harm India. Then recently, this Prime Minister Modi has brought a so-called agricultural reforms bill, which has flared up the Punjabi Sikh farmers of India, and it is not acceptable for them, because this law is again unfair, unjust, and have no reason. Even it has not been legally processed in the court, in the Indian Parliament, Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. It has bypassed all the constitutional method, and they have just implemented, thrown on the faces of the farmers of India. And the Sikhs, who are majority or in majority of farmers and a minority in India, they are protesting it. They want to have a march and sit in the Delhi unless this law has been revoked. But they are still, for the last 2 months, they are trying to enter in Delhi. They are not allowed to enter in Delhi. And since then, they are having a sit-in on the streets of Delhi, and they believe that they will get their right of self-determination towards the right of their crops, towards the right of selling them, storing them, and all these things. They don't want to be left alone, and they don't want to be dependent only on the corporate buyers. Sikhs have shown their strength so much, whether Indian police is using so much power against them through water cannon, through tear gases, firing, shelling, but they are resisting it. And there are many news that people are there with the flag of Khalistan, and Khalistan movement is reviving there. And I would like to give a good news to the Sikhs around the world that this is the time for them to get their freedom and get the Khalistan from India and make their own country and complete their dream. This was a promise done by Jawaharlal Nehru to Balwinder Singh in 1940s, that once the Sikhs will decide to go with India, the India will be part of, India will give them a separate land of Khalistan. This promise has never ever been completed. So this is the time Sikhs are comparing this new movement of farmers to the time of 1985-86, when Indian army did big massacre murders of Sikhs in India after the assassination of Indira Gandhi, and they killed the entire movement of Khalistan. Now this is the time again the Khalistan movement is rising, and I believe that in next coming few months Khalistan movement will get so much strengthened that the people of Indian Punjab and Haryana, they will get their freedom as well, and the Indian map is going to change. This is my prayer, and this is what I hope. If we talk about in the region, there are some big news that United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan have accepted and started diplomatic ties with Israel. Never expected, but that's what happened. Israel and UAE have become a very good friends, and it's like a big celebrations all over Israel and all over UAE, especially in Israel, that they have managed to bring UAE to their towns. And everybody in the world knows that all these efforts or all this pressure was done by American President Donald Trump and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. This is a very serious matter. Muslims around the world are very much concerned. There are rumors that Saudi Arabia is the next one to accept Israel and start diplomatic ties with Israel. All these news are very much disturbing for the people who believe that the struggle of Palestinians would be very badly affected with these diplomatic ties from the Arab friends with Israel, because Arabs were the biggest supporter for Palestine's liberation movement. Palestinians are calling it betrayal from the Arabs. Palestinians are not accepting these kinds of diplomatic relations by UAE, Bahrain, Oman, Sudan, but still, unfortunately, I would say that's happening. And there are news that there's a lot of tremendous pressure on Pakistan as well to accept Israel. And their argument is that Pakistan have no direct conflict with Israel. Pakistan has never, there is no direct, even geographical boundaries or anything with Israel. Israel would be beneficial in terms of trade and economy to Pakistan. So Pakistanis should not worry about having friendship and diplomatic relations with Israel. But Pakistan is resisting. Prime Minister of Pakistan has clearly stated that he will not compromise on that, and he will not go for any kind of under pressure, unless the people of Palestine have got their right, people of Palestine have got their separate state, including Jerusalem, because Pakistan believes that the struggle of Palestinian is similar struggle of Kashmiris. If Pakistan favors or Pakistan goes in a diplomatic ties with Israel, Pakistan will have no justification of supporting Kashmiris anymore. And Pakistan is supporting all over the world the Muslims for their whichever region, wherever Muslims are fighting for their freedom, Pakistan is supporting them. And I would say that Pakistan is the biggest hope for them as well. So if you look into all these matters, I believe that this is the time when Pakistan is going to recognize as the world leader for the Muslim Ummah. It looks like it's going to be a new Muslim bloc in the world, which will be anti-Israel, which will be most probably will be Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, and maybe Turkey and Iran. Pakistan doesn't want to have an ally against Israel. Pakistan wants to have ally in favor of Palestinians. That is the difference people need to understand. Pakistan wants first Palestine's liberation, and then Pakistan would like to go for any kind of diplomatic relations with Israel. Although there are many news, rumors that Pakistan is under pressure, Pakistan is going to accept, but I believe, according to my news, according to my sources, Pakistan is not going to accept it. If we talk about other matters, what's happening in the world, President Trump has lost his election, which he never anticipated, which he never thought. Still, he's in a kind of state where he's not believing it that he has lost the elections. But as a matter of fact, he has lost it. On the other hand, President Joe Biden is happy to win the election, and he's ready to take the charge in White House in second week of January. There might be some kind of resistance from President Trump, but I believe that Joe Biden is elected president of United States for the next 4 years. There are some good hopes from the Joe Biden, especially in terms of Pakistan, in terms of Pakistan-America friendship, because Trump was clearly tilted towards India for the last 4 years, although he called Imran Khan his friend as well. But Prime Minister Imran Khan's friendship and Prime Minister Modi's friendship have a lot of differences. It's entirely in different directions when it comes to India and Trump friendship. All over India was supporting Trump to win the election, but it's a big jolt for Indians as well that the Trump has lost the election. Joe Biden have clearly said that he believes that there are illegal activities going on in Indian occupied Kashmir, and he would like these illegal actions by the Indian troops must be stopped and they should be brought to the justice. So Pakistan and Joe Biden have already clearly said that about that RAC and Citizen Amendment Act and bill, that it looks like it is targeting a minority and it should not be happening in the modern world. So if we talk about all these matters, I believe that might be a little bit change in the policy, a little bit betterment for Muslims around the world and especially in Pakistan. But there is always a certain policy which America follows, and that is what they don't change. US policies are not going to change drastically if it's the change of government, whether it's a Republican or Democrats. This is my opinion about American politics in coming day. Yes, the two things which are very much concerned for 2020 and then 2021, that what is going to happen between Iran and America, Iran and Saudi Arabia, because Israel is biggest campaigner against Iran, and is forcing America to attack on Iran and Iranian nuclear sites and everything, and they have killed Iranian scientists recently. They've killed one of the Iranian commanders in Iraq. So Iran is showing whatever patience it can show, and they are saying that they will get their revenge wherever and whenever they want. So if anything happens, Pakistan's role is very important in this term and in this matter in region. I would like to remind you that in the beginning of this year, there was Iran and Saudi Arabia was on the verge of a big war, to start a war. But Pakistan came as a mediator. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Bajwa did their best efforts to stop that possible war, and Pakistan was succeeded, and this war was never initiated. But I would say again, the region is on a very sensitive stage, and Pakistan's role is very important. Pakistan will again come on front, and will Pakistan try to do their best to stop any kind of possible war between Iran or Saudi, Iran or America, Iran or Israel. because Pakistan believes that any war will be catastrophic for the region, which will affect not only Iran or Saudi Arabia or Israel, it will affect even the neighbor countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Gulf countries. It will affect the whole region. So Pakistan believes that there should be no war. All the matters should be resolved amicably through dialogues. Now, if we talk about some good news, there are good news. Pakistan economy is recovering. All the indicators are showing positive progress. Pakistan's CPEC project is towards completion day by day, rapidly, and it will be a game changer in the world. The good news is, except India, all the countries of the region, whether it's Nepal, whether it's Bhutan, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's Russia, whether it's Iran, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, they all have become the part of CPEC or OBOR. OBOR is One Belt, One Route, which is from the central eastern states of Russia to Pakistan and then going towards further down. So for the both communicational projects, OBOR and CPEC, Pakistan have a key role. Pakistan economy will grow with it, and Pakistan is looking forward to have best coming years due to CPEC project. Yes, CPEC will become is already have become Pakistan's prime project. Pakistan-China friendship is strengthening a day by day. We have seen the example of that strengthened friendship when Saudi Arabia asked for their $1 billion, and China straight away bailed out Pakistan with the $1 billion to give it to Saudi Arabia. So if we consider all these facts, there is no doubt that Pakistan and Chinese friendship is improving, is strengthening day by day. CPEC is nearly completed, and Gwadar port is already active. Pakistan is working on Pakistan-Iran gas pipeline. Pakistan is working to connect the Gwadar port to the Iranian Chabahar port so that this area will become the center of the trade for the world. And Pakistan will be the center of the world, inshallah. With all these considered facts, I believe that there are a few tough years or tough months, but eventually Pakistan, inshallah, will lead the world in terms of economy, in terms of business, trade in the region. While on the other hand, I have said many times, what Indian Prime Minister, fascist Prime Minister Modi is doing, he will be the responsible to break India in many parts, and he will be known as Gorbachev of India. That is what Modi is going to be known as, the Gorbachev of India, because there are many separatist movements already going on in India, and there is no other way for people in minorities in India but to get their freedom, whether it is Sikhs, whether it is Christians, whether it's Muslims. And on the other hand, if we talk about the overall situation between any kind of war situation between Pakistan and India, yes, there are very intense situation on the borders. Pakistan army is ready to retaliate. Pakistan Prime Minister, Foreign Minister have, I should say, repeatedly warned to the world that India is planning a kind of a false flag operation or a surgical strike against Pakistan to divert the attention of its own public from whatever happening inside India in terms of Kashmir, in terms of Haryana, Punjab, Delhi, and Junagadh, and everywhere, Assam, everywhere. And especially since they have been beaten by Chinese, and they have been humiliated by China, and China has taken over 1,000 miles of Ladakh and other area of the claimed Indians. So all these embarrassments, Indian Prime Minister or Indian think tank wants to divert their public's attention from these embarrassments, concerns, and unpopular